Welcome to our deep dive today. This one is especially exciting, I think, because it was actually sparked by a question you sent in.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah. So many of you have been asking, is AI really worth all the hype? Is it worth all the time and money being poured into it? It's a good question. And to try to answer it, we're going to be taking a bit of a trip back in time, all the way back to, get this, 1991.
Wow.
1991.
I know, right? The internet was practically a baby then.
Yeah, the internet was, just a baby.
Exactly. And we dug up this fascinating discussion thread from an early online forum. Just picture, like, the prehistoric version of Google Groups.
Okay, yeah.
And what's amazing is that even back then, people were already kind of wrestling with the economic implications of AI. Like, is it worth it?
Hmm.
And to be clear, when we're talking about this, we're initially focusing on what's called narrow AI. Those systems designed for specific tasks like playing chess or translating languages.
Right.
But later on, we'll touch on the much broader idea of artificial general intelligence, AGI.
But first, let's set the stage. Our time machine is set for 1991. Picture a world with dial-up modems and no smartphones.
Oh, I can hear the dial-up tone already.
Right. And amidst all that, this discussion thread explodes onto the scene with the title, A Naive Idea,
Why?
and the author, Mauro Tucumini. And let me tell you, Mauro does not hold back. He flat out predicts that artificial intelligence will never be economically viable.
Wow. Bold statement.
Very bold.
So what was his reasoning there?
Well, his reasoning was pretty straightforward. Mauro believed that creating true AI would always be more complex and therefore more expensive than simply training a human to do the same job. He even questioned whether true AI was even achievable at all. I mean, you gotta remember, this was a time when even personal computers were still relatively new to most people.
Right. So like even the idea of a personal computer was kind of mind-blowing back then.
Totally. Makes you wonder what he would think about our world today.
Oh, yeah. I mean, now we carry supercomputers around in our pockets.
Right. I can only imagine his reaction. But even in 1991, there were already some early examples of AI making waves, right?
Oh, absolutely. There were definitely signs of what was to come.
Like what? What kinds of things?
Well, you had things like early expert systems, those programs that tried to capture human knowledge.
Okay. Yeah.
And you had some basic machine learning algorithms starting to emerge. But, Mauro's skepticism, it really highlights this core tension that's persisted throughout AI's history.
Mm-hmm.
The balance between the incredible potential of AI and the practical challenges of actually developing and deploying it.
I see. So it's this push and pull between the what-ifs and the how-tos.
Yeah, exactly. And this tension is playing out right there in this 1991 forum discussion. It's fascinating.
So how did other folks in this forum respond to Mauro's, his kind of bold prediction?
Well, not everyone agreed with him, of course. One of the first to counter Mauro was a guy named Todd. And his argument turned out to be remarkably insightful, actually.
Okay, what did Todd say?
Todd said that while humans might be cheaper to train in the present, AI had the potential to become far more cost-effective in the future, especially as technology advanced and we figured out this thing, mass production.
Ooh, mass production of intelligence. Now that's an intriguing concept.
It is, and it's something that, we're seeing play out today in a lot of ways.
Yeah, when you put it like that, it really does make you think. So Todd essentially flipped Mauro's argument on its head. He suggested that the initial investment in AI might be high, but the long-term cost per use could plummet. Much like, and this is a great analogy he used, the telephone network.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, think about it. The initial infrastructure for telephones was incredibly expensive.
Oh, for sure.
But now making a call is practically free.
Yeah, it's almost like an afterthought, right?
Totally. So we've got one guy thinking AI is too expensive to be practical, another thinking it'll eventually be cheaper than training humans. This is getting good. Who else jumped into this debate?
Things got even more interesting when a user named Zian entered the chat. And they did not hold back either. They called Mauro's argument ridiculous.
Ooh, shots fired.
Right. I mean, it's a good discussion when someone breaks out the word ridiculous.
Definitely. What else did they say?
Well, Zian argued that computers could potentially do things humans either couldn't or wouldn't do, and potentially faster and more accurately.
So it wasn't just about replicating human intelligence, but surpassing it in certain areas.
Exactly. It's not just about replacing humans, but about expanding what's even possible.
I like that. And I bet that was a pretty radical idea back then.
Oh, totally. But Zian also highlighted a point that seems especially relevant today. The ease of duplicating computer knowledge compared to human knowledge.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
Right. Once you've taught a computer something, you can copy that knowledge infinitely. With humans, it's a much slower one-by-one process.
Yeah, it's like the difference between like hitting copy and paste versus having to teach every single person individually.
Exactly. And that difference in scalability, it's become even more important as AI is developed.
Wow, that is incredibly prescient, especially when you consider the scale of AI we have today. It's like they were looking into the future. Did anyone else make predictions that turned out to be, kind of spot on?
Oh, absolutely. And this next one is especially compelling. Into the discussion walks Chris Malcolm, who, in 1991, had some serious street cred. He was from the Department of Artificial Intelligence at Edinburgh University.
Okay, so we've got a skeptic, some optimists, and now a bona fide AI expert. What did Chris bring to the table?
Chris countered Maro's pessimism with some really concrete examples of how AI was already outperforming humans economically, even back then. And get this, his examples are still incredibly relevant today.
Really? Okay, I'm hooked. What were they?
Well, he talked about chess machines beating human grandmasters for a fraction of the cost of training a human player.
Oh, wow. Yeah, like I remember when Deep Blue beat Kasparov in 97. That was huge.
Right. And Chris was already seeing those trends back in 91. He also talked about sophisticated math software, providing high-level assistance for way less than the cost of educating a human expert, and language translation tools that were already starting to speed up professional translation work, which, really foreshadows the massive world of machine translation we have now.
Hold on, that's incredible. They were already seeing the early hints of what AI could do for things like translation.
Oh, absolutely. It was
Uh-huh.
definitely on people's radar, even back then. And Chris really drove home this point that, just like with a telephone network, the initial investment in AI might be significant, but the cost per use could become incredibly low over time.
So it's not just about the initial price tag, but the long-term value.
Exactly. And this is a key concept when you're thinking about the economics of AI. It's not always about immediate savings, but about the potential for huge gains down the road.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm starting to see why you picked this particular discussion. These folks were really onto something. Who else joined the fray?
Well, next up was Jacob, and he brought up another really crucial point that's only become more important over time: the ability of AI to capture the expertise of many individuals, something a single human could never do.
Ah, okay, so instead of just having one expert, you could have an AI that's learned from like a whole bunch of them.
Exactly. He even gave this example. Imagine an expensive expert system, which, by the way, is basically a program that tries to codify human knowledge into a set of rules a computer can follow.
Okay, I think I get it. So like early medical diagnosis programs where you input symptoms and the system suggests possible causes
Yeah.
based on what it knows.
Exactly. Like a digital doctor's assistant.
Right. I can see how that could be powerful. And probably a lot cheaper than seeing a bunch of specialists.
Right. So Jacob argued that even a pricey expert system like that could still be far cheaper per user than hiring multiple human experts.
So it's not just about cost effectiveness compared to one human, but potentially many.
Right. It's about scaling expertise in a way that's just not possible with humans alone, which is, one of the things that makes AI so potentially transformative.
What a fascinating way to look at it. Okay, so we've got the practical arguments, the economic comparisons, and then, just when I thought it couldn't get any deeper, we get a dose of philosophy, right?
Oh, you're talking about Mark.
Hmm.
Yeah, he offered a much more philosophical perspective. He saw AI as the next step in human evolution, enabling knowledge transfer without all the limitations of human learning.
Whoa, that's a deep thought. So it's not just about efficiency, but about the very nature of knowledge and progress.
Exactly. He's taking us beyond the purely economic considerations and into the realm of like what it means to be human in an age of intelligent machines.
Okay, my brain is officially doing backflips. So we've got practical arguments, economic comparisons, and now even philosophical implications of AI. This discussion is really heating up. Did anyone try to bring things back down to earth a bit?
Well, Tony K did. He chimed in and agreed with Marrow that, ultimately AI development is driven by economics.
Okay.
But he saw that as a positive force.
Really? How so?
He argued that this economic incentive would actually push AI development in directions that are useful and beneficial to society.
Interesting. So Tony K is suggesting that the profit motive might actually steer AI development towards good.
Precisely. Which, is a debate that's still raging today. Should we let market forces shape the future of AI, or do we need more, ethical guidelines and regulations?
That's a huge question, and it seems like one that we're only beginning to grapple with.
It is, and it's a question that has its roots in these early discussions from the dawn of the internet age. It's fascinating to see how these themes have evolved over time.
All right, so we've traveled back to 1991, eavesdropped on an early online forum, and heard a wide range of perspectives on the economic viability of AI. Some were skeptical, others wildly optimistic. And some, like Zian and Chris, turned out to be remarkably accurate in their predictions. It really highlights how these fundamental questions about AI's value have been with us since the very beginning.
It's like we've unearthed this hidden treasure trove of insights about the economic forces that have shaped AI. And I think it raises some really important questions for us today. Knowing what we know now about AI in 2024, what stands out to you from this 1991 discussion? Whose arguments seem most prescient, most off base?
Hmm. That's a really good question. What's striking to me is how some of these early internet users were able to see the trajectory of AI development so clearly. They recognized the potential for scalability, replicability, and AI's ability to outperform humans in certain tasks, even when the technology was still in its infancy.
That's a great observation. It really makes you wonder, if they could see those things so clearly back in 1991,
Mm.
what might we be missing today? What aspects of AI's economic impact are we only just beginning to grasp? That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. It's kind of like we're standing on the shoulders of these internet pioneers,
Yeah.
and we're trying to see further into the future of AI than they could.
Yeah, it's a powerful image.
It is. And what's particularly fascinating to me is how much this 1991 discussion really mirrors the debates we're still having today.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the more things change, the more they stay the same, right?
Right. I mean, we're still asking those big questions like, are robots going to steal all our jobs?
Yep. Right.
Or will AI create entirely new industries we can't even imagine yet? I mean, will it make the rich richer and the poor poorer? Or will it somehow lead to a more equitable distribution of resources?
Yeah. It's like every time there's a new breakthrough in AI, these questions come bubbling right back up to the surface.
Exactly. These fundamental economic anxieties and opportunities surrounding AI, they're not new. They've been with us since the very beginning. And even though the technology has advanced dramatically since 1991, we're still grappling with these same core questions.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. It's like this underlying hum that's always there no matter how much the melody changes.
It's like we're all still figuring out the rules of the game as we go along.
Yeah, we're making it up as we go along in a
Yeah.
lot of ways.
But before we get too lost in the what ifs of the future, let's try to, distill some wisdom from this 1991 time capsule. Like, what were the most compelling arguments they made, both for and against the economic viability of AI? What really stood out?
Well, on the skeptical side, we had Morrow, right, who really believed that AI would always be more expensive than human labor. And his argument rested on this idea that replicating human intelligence is just inherently complex and costly.
Right, like building a brain from scratch is a lot harder than just, teaching a person to do something.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And, there's still some truth to that, right?
Yeah.
Developing sophisticated AI systems can be incredibly resource intensive.
Oh, absolutely. But then we had those counter arguments from Todd and Zian, who believed that AI had the potential to become far cheaper than human labor, particularly as the technology matured and mass production became possible.
Ah, yes, the mass production of intelligence. That was their big idea, right?
It was. And, it's an idea that's really taken root in many ways. I mean, think about all the AI-powered services we use every day that are practically free.
Exactly. And their argument really hinged on AI's scalability and replicability, right?
Right.
Once you've developed an AI system, you can deploy it and copy it much more easily and cheaply than training and employing humans. It's like the difference between printing a million copies of a book and hand copying a million scrolls.
Yeah, okay, that's a really good way to put it. Like, once you've got that initial AI blueprint, you can basically just stamp it out as many times as you need.
Exactly. And then, of course, we have Chris coming in with those real-world examples, the chess machines, the math software, the early language translation tools. He was basically showing that even in 1991, there were already areas where AI was proving to be more cost-effective than human expertise.
Oh, yeah, Chris really brought the receipts. He wasn't just theorizing, he was pointing to things that were already happening.
Exactly. And we all know how much those trends have accelerated in the decades since, right?
Oh, totally. What seemed like a niche capability back then has exploded into entire industries built around AI.
It really has. And it makes you wonder what those 1991 forum users would think if they could see the world today.
I know, right? I mean, facial recognition software is practically everywhere now. We're having casual conversations with AI assistants in our homes. It's wild.
It's mind-boggling how quickly things have
And
changed.
then there's Jaded's point about AI's ability to capture and scale expertise, which I think really gets at the heart of AI's economic potential.
Yeah, that's a huge one.
It's like AI can be this collective brain combining the knowledge of many humans into one system.
Exactly. And he illustrated that with the example of expert systems, those early attempts to codify human knowledge into a form that computers could understand and use.
Right, those digital doctor's assistants we were talking about.
Okay.
Even back then, they could see how this kind of technology could be more efficient and cost-effective than relying on individual human experts.
Yeah, it's like having access to a team of specialists at your fingertips, all for the price of a single software program, which is incredibly powerful when you think about it.
It is. And then just when we thought we had a good handle on the economic arguments, Mark comes in with this whole other perspective, right? Suggesting that AI might not just be about efficiency, but about a fundamental shift in how knowledge is transferred and evolved.
Right. He's like, hold on, everyone. Let's zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture here.
Exactly. It's like he's taking us from this very practical nuts and bolts discussion to this grand, sweeping view of history. Suddenly, we're not just talking about dollars and cents, but the future of humanity.
Yeah, it's a pretty profound shift in perspective.
It is. And then Tony Kaye brings us back down to earth, reminding us that ultimately, economic forces will drive the development of AI, for better or worse.
Right, like that profit motive is this powerful engine, and we have to figure out how to steer it in the right direction.
Exactly. Like the profit motive could either be a guiding star or a potential pitfall, depending on how we navigate it.
It's a tightrope walk for sure.
So we've got this incredibly rich and nuanced conversation from 1991, touching on everything from the nuts and bolts of cost effectiveness to the philosophical implications of artificial intelligence. And the most amazing part, it's all still so relevant to the discussions we're having today.
It really is. It's like we've been given this roadmap from the past, and we're still following its trails today.
And just like any good roadmap, it highlights not only the paths we've already traveled, but also the forks in the road ahead, the choices we have yet to make.
That's a great analogy. So, we've explored the arguments, the predictions, the hopes, and the anxieties expressed in this 1991 forum discussion. But I'm curious from your perspective, what are your takeaways? Knowing what we know now in 2024, what seems most insightful? What seems most off base?
That's a great question. And I think each listener has to answer that for themselves, right? But what strikes me most is how accurately some of these folks predicted the trajectory of AI development. They foresaw the rise of specific technologies, the economic pressures that would drive innovation, and even the potential societal impacts.
Yeah, it's like they had a crystal ball.
Hmm.
But it really gets me thinking. It's what they didn't foresee, what they couldn't have imagined back then. And that brings us to a topic that's become increasingly important in recent years.
This whole discussion, it's been focused on what we call narrow AI, right? Those systems designed for specific tasks, like playing chess or, translating languages. But what about the economic implications of artificial general intelligence or AGI, like that hypothetical point where machines have, human-level intelligence, but across the board?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. I mean, that's where we move from, thinking about specific economic impacts of AI to potentially rethinking our whole economic system. This thread from 1991, it barely even mentions AGI.
Really? Why not?
Well, it was barely even a concept back then, but now it's something that, researchers, policymakers, and economists, they're all seriously considering it.
It's almost like they were looking through a keyhole at AI, and now the door is swinging wide open.
It is, and it raises a whole new set of challenges.
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, if even narrow AI is already raising concerns about job displacement and inequality, what happens when machines can potentially outperform us in any intellectual domain?
Right. The questions become less about will AI be cheaper than a human for, task X, and more about what does work even mean when AGI exists. Our traditional economic models, they might not be enough to understand that world.
Okay, yeah. Mind officially blown. We've gone from debating the cost of chess-playing machines to pondering the meaning of work in an AGI-powered world. That's quite a leap.
It is. but it's a leap we need to be prepared to make. And that's why I think revisiting these early discussions is so valuable, you know?
Yeah.
It reminds us that while the technology, it evolves so rapidly, the fundamental questions about AI's impact on humanity,
Hmm.
those change much more slowly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
When you're thinking about both the immediate economic effects, the things we can kind of see coming down the pipeline,
Hmm.
and the long-term societal shifts AI might bring, the things that are harder to predict.
It's like we need to be both, like sprinters and marathon runners at the same time.
Exactly. We got to be agile and adaptable in the short term, but also have this long-term vision for where we want to go.
It makes you wonder what people will be saying about AI, 30 years from now. Like, will they be looking back at our discussions and thinking, wow, they were so naive?
Oh, I'm sure they will. But that's part of the beauty of it, right? We're all figuring this out together as we go along.
Yeah,
There's no instruction manual for navigating the age of AI.
that's true. And maybe someday someone will listen back to this episode, and be amazed at how we were grappling with these early AGI questions.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool, actually. And it's a powerful reminder, I think, to approach these topics with both curiosity and a sense of responsibility for the future we're creating, right?
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on. We hope this deep dive has given you some new perspectives on the evolution of AI and the economic questions that have been there from the very beginning. Keep exploring, keep asking those big questions. That's what keeps things interesting.